I was going to net that, but I'll swing it in. Okay, so that's the camera moved. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take my little bread punch, clean the old bit out, a piece of punch in there from this morning when I was doing the bait video. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the hook, clear that bit of punch out, loaded the punch with a bit of bread. Now in the side of the punch, and I'll show you this in a second, I'll come up to the camera and show you, there's a little groove, and what you do, I'll bring it up to the camera now so you can actually see. So there's the little punch, and in the side of the punch you'll see there's a small groove, and what we do with our hook is we put it into that groove and we pull it out, and then we turn the punch around the bend of the hook, and that's now loaded up, ready to go. And it looks a very tiny piece of bread punch there, but once it gets into the water and starts to expand, it's a lot bigger than you think it is. So let's get out on the line we want to be on. Now the float's just settling down really slowly there in the water. It might drag under because we might still be on a bit of weed here. And if it is, what we'll do is we'll just take a couple of inches off and we'll come up in the water and run over the top. It seems to be running through nicely. There we go. And there's our first fish. So that didn't take long. So it's a nice little little roach. Okay, pop him in there. Get our bread punch again. Punch our bread into the slot, onto the hook, just turn it round the hook slightly. Okay. So we're holding it steady at the thing so it lowers down through the water, and if we don't get a bite on the drop, then we're going to let it run slightly down the peg. As I say, we're sitting very high up here today, right over the top of where the fish are, so surprised we're getting any bites at all, to be honest with you. The light's a little bit awkward. Now the only problem on this stretch of the canal with bread is that you tend to get a few fish early, and then what happens is the predators move in over that bread and you stop catching. So I'm half expecting to get a few early fish and then have to perhaps maybe loose feed a few pinkies or do something a bit different. And sometimes when you're fishing with punch, you need to put a couple of hits in to get the fish to actually come. I'll say we got one straight away, so that was quite encouraging. Nothing that run through. The bread's still there. So it may be that we're drifting too far down the canal there, because I let it run quite a long way. So we'll try and fish over the top of actually where we threw the bread and see if the fish have come right to the top of the peg, which they may well have done. As I said before, sometimes if you've got bits of weed sticking up from the bottom and your bait is falling in between those bands of weed and going down the middle, then sometimes the fish will be feeding above that weed and they won't go down in amongst it, because there's the risk there might be a pike or a big perch sitting in that weed, and therefore what they'll do is they'll stay up in the water where they feel safer, they can get away quicker. And therefore when your bread punch sinks through really quickly, it can then disappear through the weed or below them, and then you just sit there without any bites. So one of the things you can do to try and check, see if that's happening, is you can hold it on a tight line. So hold the whip on a tight line and allow things to fall much slower through the water, and then hoping that a fish intercepts it on the way down, which we're going to try now. Or you can simply come shallower and try running through off the bottom and see if that helps. There you go. Slightly better one. I will swing it anyway. I was going to net that, but we'll swing it in. Okay, so the other thing you need to make sure that you've got with you is a disgorger. That one doesn't need a disgorger, but always carry a disgorger, and if I get a fish that's hooked a bit deeper, I'll come and show you how to actually use one. So that roach's a couple of ounces, that one, so it's a much better fish. So again, single bit of bread punch. Now sometimes it takes a few minutes for these fish to turn up on this line, and you might get the odd fish, and then suddenly you'll get a run of 4 or 5 fish very quickly, which is what we're hoping for. But if you don't, then, and it sort of goes a bit quiet after a couple of early fish, then sometimes what you can do is you need to put another ball of liquidized bread in, just to give them a bit more confidence. So there's another fish. So it looks like 1 or 2 might be turning up. Okay, so this one's taken the bait down a little bit. So I'm going to bring it up and show you how to use a disgorger. So when you're using a disgorger, what you need to do is you need to keep tension on the line. So there's our fish. Okay, hopefully you can see that. And in the disgorger there's a little slot which we put onto the line like that. Okay, we then push the disgorger down inside, and we just touch the end, and as you can see, the hook goes into the corner and comes out really quickly. So that's how you use a disgorger. Pop him in the net. Now I don't like using keep nets usually when I'm not match fishing, but when you're fishing on the canals, as I say, roach are a shoal fish, and if you keep dropping them back into the canal, they will swim back into the shoal, and they can spook the other fish and stop them feeding. So sometimes it's a good idea, a nice fish safe keep net, keep them in the net, drop them in there. It stops them going back into the shoal and spooking the shoal, and you perhaps catch more fish. The other option, of course, is put the fish back somewhere else. So if you're catching them here, go and put them just up round the corner there, and then hopefully you don't hopefully they don't spook the other fish, because it's too far for them to swim back round. They just go and sulk in the weeds somewhere. So as I say, bread punch, very very good, very cheap bait, very good, because it's a big visual bait. And in an evening like this, when the light's going down, or on a day when it's been cloudy and overcast all day, bread punch can be absolutely devastating. And today we'll probably only feed 2 of those little hand-sized balls, so probably what 3 slices of bread, and then it's hung up on something. Then 3 slices of bread, and then 3 or 4 slices of bread we'll feed, and we'll probably use 1 slice of bread for punches. I mean, you'll get 100 fish out of 1 slice of bread. So for 5 slices of bread, you can have a really good day's, really good evening's fishing. You can't beat that for value for money. And of course, we've always got bread in the house. You can liquidize your bread and stick it in the freezer, so you don't have to, you've always got some available. Just defrost it before you're going to go fishing. Pick up a couple of slices of fresh bread out the bread bin, and you're good to go. Now that time, when I flicked that in, I know, I felt it come down this side. I think there's a band of weed running, of these grass weeds running down the middle of the channel here. And the first few times I was over the top of them. There's a very small one up in the water. That took right up in the water, really high, tiny little fish. So there's a band of reeds going down the middle there, or this grass stuff coming up from the bottom. And if we drop this side of it, of course the liquidized bread's all gone the other side of it. And as I said before, you're then fishing down a channel that there's no feed in and no fish in. So it pays just to be careful. Don't flick the whip all over the place. Let it roll out. This is the advantage of using a 1/2 gram float. You can just throw it out underarm and get it to land in the same place, in the same line every single time, so that you know exactly where you're expecting to get a bite. And that way, what you can do is, as you're fishing, if you start getting bites, you're getting bites in a set place all the time, and then suddenly you're not getting bites there, they're further down the peg, or they've just disappeared, or they're coming higher, you can adjust your feeding. You could feed some more bait to bring them back in, or it might be a predator's moved in and they've just backed off slightly. It might just be you've caught too many out of the shoal, and the fish then get a little bit wary, and what they do is they'll back off a bit further across the canal. They'll go a bit closer to the weed. They might go further down the canal away from you, and you can then actually just either feed to bring them back up, or you might think, well, we're sitting really high over them, it might be better to try and catch them further down the peg, and just let your arm go a bit further and let the rig run a bit further down the peg. Now at the moment we're using a very small punch, and what I might do, and the reason I chose to use a very small punch is it's probably about a 2 or 3 mil punch, and the reason I chose to use that was at the start it actually helps you to hook more fish. If you use a big punch, big piece of punch, sometimes you can miss bites. So if you use a small bit, you have more chance of hooking the fish. You can use a small hook and a smaller punch. What we might do in a minute is try a bigger bit of punch and just see if that picks out any bigger fish. And I also might, even though we've only fed liquidized bread, I might just nick a pinky onto the hook. I haven't fed any, but just try a maggot on the hook, because sometimes maggot might be better on the hook there might be some perch hanging around in there amongst these roach that have come in because the roach are feeding, the perch come in to have a look, and it might be that there's just one or two perch sitting in the peg there that won't take bread punch, but if you put a pinky on, you might have a chance of getting a perch as well. So we've not got long tonight. I've only really wanted to do this to show you how I would approach starting off fishing on the canal. And there's one or two midges starting to come out now. So I think what I'm going to do, it's been one of those days, is we'll try a bigger piece of punch. So I'm going to get one of my slightly larger bread punches out. I think I'll put them in here actually. There they are. I'm going to get a bigger piece of punch so it stands out a bit more. That one there. It's a big jump up because I seem to have misplaced the actual size punch that I want to use, which is disappointing, but and it's still got a bit of bread in from this morning, so we'll try this one. It's a very small hook for this big piece of punch, but it will tell us if we're going to get bites quicker. And if this doesn't work, then what we'll do is we'll feed a bit more liquidized bread, and we'll pop we'll put a few pinkies in with it. Just scatter a few pinkies into the liquidized bread, and we'll see if that makes any difference. And again, we're going to throw the liquidized bread in exactly the same place as last time. A little indication there. I think there's a few fish there, but they seem to be quite wary at the moment for some reason. I'll try one more time, and then we'll feed some. Oh, me saying flick it out the same every time, and then don't do it myself. So, okay. Now, as I said before, what can happen? There's a lot of pike. There was a guy lure fishing here this morning while I was doing the video mixing up the ground bait. He had 3 jack pike between the lock and here. So there's plenty of pike in here. So it might just be that we've got a pike moved into the peg, because we've got a fish a chuck and then all of a sudden nothing, which is a bit suspicious, to be honest with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up one more ball of ground bait, of liquidized bread. I'm going to throw that. Oh, that's too far. Not very clever. Oh, there you go. There's a fish though. Oh, it's a better fish. Now got himself in a load of weed. Oh, there he's off now. We'll net this one. This is a hybrid. So there we've got a nice roach bream hybrid, which just goes to show, although everybody says there aren't any, that there must be some bream in here, because there's hybrids. There you go, nice fish. So having thrown that, now that's going to the bigger punch and just giving it a little bit more time on a much bigger piece of bread. So it might be that the hybrids are actually, they'll only take a bigger piece of bread. They're not going to waste their energy trying to get a little small piece of bread. So we're going to do that. We're going to throw one more ball in, because we're not going to be here long, but this time I'm going to put a few pinkies into it. We're not taking this bread home, so we'll just chuck a few pinkies in there. And then we can try a pinky on the hook if we want to. There's a fish just come out of the water down there like it was being chased by something. So I think there are a few predators kicking about this evening, which isn't surprising. There we go. Oh, another fish. A slightly better one, but this is a roach. Always tell a roach fight better than a skimmer or a hybrid, although hybrids can give a good account of themselves as well. But as I say, we're getting a few fish this evening. We'll stick for now on the bigger piece of bread punch. But when you're fishing, what you've got to do is you've all the time think about what you're catching, how regularly you're catching, what depth you're catching at, and all the time you can be prepared to change things and just test things and adjust things a little bit to see if it actually improves your catch, if you catch bigger fish. You know, we've put a bigger piece of punch on, and straight away we've had a few bigger fish. So before we were getting, you know, we've had a few tiny fish. We put a bigger piece of punch on, and all of a sudden we got one or two. I mean, I should really have netted that last roach, so that's a couple of fish that should have been netted really. So you know, that's all really encouraging. So we know that works. So in a minute, what we're going to do is we'll have a couple more runs through on this, and then if it goes quiet again, I might put a pinky on, or go back to a small piece of punch, or maybe add an inch of depth and see if going a little bit further over depth and holding the bait still works. Because at the moment what we're doing is we're just letting the float go through really slowly, and bigger fish quite sometimes they won't take a bait when it's running through. They want the bait sat there so they've got time to actually look at it. Also, when you get towards the end of your peg on a whip, what tends to happen is the float starts to come across, and you need to be aware of that, because if you can't keep your bait going in a straight line, if you picture a fish, if a fish is watching the bait and the bait's coming in a direct line, all the flow's going in a direct line, and suddenly your bait's out there going like that, and then suddenly it comes across like this, it's not natural and the fish won't take it. So you need to check it every few minutes, make sure that you give a bit more extra line so you can actually get it going in a straight line, and you'll catch more fish. So we're going to have one more go on this, and then what I might do is pop a pinky on and see if we catch on a pinky. So we've got the line right behind the float, so hopefully as the float sinks it will then go in a straight line along the canal, in line with the flow. It won't be crabbing across the canal, it will be going down the straight line, which is where any loose bait would go, and where the fish are expecting the bait to look natural, as if it had just fallen into the water and was just coming down towards them. So move the pole out a little bit, and it actually keeps the line behind the float. Oh, that was a bite. Missed that. Let's start down there, because that was down towards the back end of the peg. So again, that's sort of 3 or 4 bites have been down towards the far end of the peg. So that may be where the fish are actually sitting, where the bait is quite deep here. So you've probably got, I didn't actually check on up against me, but I'm imagining it's probably 6 or 7 foot here. So if it's 6 or 7 foot deep, and you're throwing in liquidized bread that goes down really slowly through the water, and there's a gentle tow, it's sort of like that in the canal, towing down over that lock. So what tends to happen then is, if you've got a tow over that depth, it will take that bait probably a metre or so beyond where we threw it in, before it hits the bottom. Now obviously if that becomes a problem and we're catching everything further down, what you could do is feed closer to us to bring the fish up here. But if you remember when we plumbed up, there was a bank of weed higher up the peg. So there is a risk that if we feed higher up, it falls this side of that bank of weed. There you go, there's another fish. So the fish at the moment seem to be right down at the bottom end of the peg, which is okay, because what it does, it puts them a bit further away from us, which actually probably makes them a little bit more confident. So as I said before, what we're going to do is we'll try something a bit different. I'm going to pop on a little pinky, a little fluorescent pinky, and we're going to hook it through we want a very small hook, so we're going to hook it through the pointy end. So there's more hook point showing. Nice pinky. And we'll flick that down there, because we put some pinkies in that last ball. So you never know. As I say, the float's sinking nice and slowly with that spread bulk. Oh, there you go. Now, that actually took that on the drop. So that wasn't a good fish. That would have been one of these tiny little fish. So I'm going to let that go again. I'm going to hold it on a tight line. And what you'll probably find is that if we hook one of these, which could be tricky because they take it really quick, that they're smaller roach that are just hanging around in mid-water, maybe 3-4 foot down in 7 foot of water above that weed. And as the bait falls down through them, they just grab at it. And that was a typical little roach bite up in the water. The float sort of sitting at that angle, and then suddenly it just went like that away from me. So that's got to full depth, so I'm hoping that, that we get a fish. I don't really want to chase them too far down the peg, because life gets very awkward then. You're doing this all the time, compensating for where the pole is, for where so you can actually get the extra line without pulling the float off line. No. So as I say, at the moment we've been fishing just off the bottom. So a pinky just off the bottom probably doesn't look very natural. So what we might need to do with this pinky is actually add a couple of inches and see if that makes a difference. But before we do that, we'll run this one through. If we don't get a bite this time, we're going to go back to a big piece of punch bread. Okay, maybe they just want punch bread better. And then after that, what we'll do is we'll add a few inches so we know we're definitely on the bottom. And then we'll go back to pinky again, and we'll try pinky again. So what we'll do is we're going to go back to the big piece of bread punch, and we'll see if that works, because we're not really caught on that pinky. We missed one small bite, so now I've got a little box on my side with my bread punch in, and what you do is every time you take a bit, you just close it, and what it does is it keeps that slice of bread really moist, stops it drying out, because when your bread dries out, it comes off the hook, it doesn't stay on very well. So you really want that something you can keep it in. If you don't have a box, then just have a polythene bag on your side tray and put the bread slice, have a few slices in a polythene bag, and then just take one slice or half a slice out at a time. Use it, and then once it dries out, if it starts coming off, throw it to the ducks and just get the next slice out and start fishing again. So you don't need a posh punch box. They're very good if you want to invest in one, but they're not actually essential, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. There's a big pike just rolled just up there, which that guy who's gone down lure fishing is probably going to be gutted that he's just walked straight past that, and it's obviously feeding. So right, so that's gone down. There you go. So that's another fish right at the end. You can see the whip doing all the work there. Yeah, so that's another hybrid. Well, actually it's not, it's a roach. It's a big roach, a bigger roach. So the fish are right at the end of the peg. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the hook, because I'm going to try and go a bit over depth and to fish pinky. So I've just got a feeling, in fact I'll tell you what we'll do, we're going to go for a bigger punch hook, because missed one or two bites on that one, and had a few indications and they've not come to anything, and I'm just wondering whether they're picking the bait up and rejecting it and I'm actually not seeing the bite. So I'm going to go from a size 22 to a size 20 on 08. I've actually not tied very many hook lengths up, so I'm actually short today. So I'm going to go for a size 20. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add, it seems to be going through without any problems at all really, so on that line, providing we put it down exactly down that line every time. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to my eyesight's absolutely appalling. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add an inch of depth, pop that into the thing. Always take your time when you make changes. Always pop your hook into the little rubber band, because the last thing you want is you just put a new hook on and then you try and rush and you drop it, it gets caught in the grass and you snap your hook length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 inches, and that's possibly going to now be actually touching or just on the bottom. But as I say, there's a bit of flow and we're holding back a little bit just to steady it. So it might be that puts us just tripping the bottom nicely, and gives some of these better fish a bit more time to see the bait and take it. And with a bigger piece of bread punch, hopefully we can attract 1 or 2 nicer fish. Now it might be that it doesn't work at all and they spook off the big hook, because the big hook will be heavier and therefore the bread will go down a bit quicker. So it might be that doesn't work at all and we have to go back to a smaller hook, or this might drag over under on the weed, or there's any number of things could happen. And sometimes just lifting the bristle, of steadying it, lifting the bristle out of the water and letting it drop back again, can actually just induce a bite. Sometimes there'll be lots of fish there. We've caught a few, not a lot, but we've caught a few fish. It's very, very clear, this water. You can probably see the bottom in 5 foot of water here today. And therefore, if you can see the bottom in 5 foot of water, then the fish can see all the commotion when you hook a fish, and they'll probably be backing off quite a lot. So what you're trying to do really is you're trying to you need to get your presentation bang on. And sometimes you can get away with absolute murder with bread. You can just fish it and feed it and you catch every single put in, and other times it can be really, they can be really finicky. So there you go. I'm going to try and watch that down and see how far down the peg I think that's actually going. I don't think it's going as far as we think it is, but I might be wrong. Might as well feed it. We're not taking it home with us, so, and the light's starting to go now anyway, so we probably haven't got out very much longer. So as I say, if this doesn't work, put one a little bit higher up. As I say, we'll see if we can bring the fish a little bit higher in the peg. Has gone very quiet though, so I'm just wondering whether we have a bit of a predator issue. I'm going to hold this on a tight line and then allow that to just sink. Again, it might be, as I said before, we might, adding that 2 inches, we might just be dropping down between those little strands of weed and the fish might not be able to see the bait. So we might need to take that a couple of inches back off. Let's take that off. You can always, that's the one thing you can always do. You can always reverse. I'll put it there, ruin my own rule. So we're going to take the 2 inches back off again. Take the 2 inches back off, and then we can, that'll hopefully put us back off the bottom again. And it might be just those little strands of weed might be sticking up this far, it might be that far from the bottom, but it might be that when you get right down amongst them, that the roach don't feel confident sitting in amongst them, particularly if a predator has moved in, is now sat in the area. And as I say, we're not catching over the top of where our bait should be hitting the bottom. That's just held up on a bit of weed then. So we're not catching where we would expect to catch, right over the top of, over where the bait's hitting the bottom. We're catching either further down the peg beyond where it would be, or we're catching on the drop above it. And that suggests to me that we've got, perhaps got a predator sitting there. And say that's interesting because we came off the bottom and straight away we got a bite. So kind of suggests that the fish are sitting above that weed, and that if you drop down between it, then they'll not follow it, and that's often because they are quite wary about predators. So we'll have one more go on this, and then we'll loose feed a few pinkies just for fun. You could do this with a catapult, but we're only fishing at 6 meters, so we can just throw a few in. Oh, that was a bite on the drop. Okay, so there's a few fish there now. So we'll have one more go on the punch. Now, when you're getting smaller roach on the drop like this, off the bottom, fishing a big piece of punch and a big hook is not ideal, because what they can do is they can knock it around and bang it about and not actually get it in their mouth. So you get all these really fast little dinks on the float, goes under, comes back up, and that's basically because those little fish can't get the bait in their mouth and they're just grabbing as much as they can and running off with it, and it just pulls away from them. So you throw 2 or 3 pinkies in at a time. It's going to rain now. I don't want it to rain. That'd be horrible. There you go. Should really have netted that, but I could see it was well hooked in the lip. That one's only got half a tail. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick a pinky on. I'll have a quick go on pinky, and then we'll have a quick summary of what we've done here tonight. Oh, it's not a very good pinky. Have one like that. Okay, so we'll flick this in like that. So flick a few pinkies over the top. Oh, missed that one. You see that? Missed that. Terrible. Throw a few more pinkies. And what it is with pinkies, what you want to be doing is we want to be holding the float sort of almost still, allowing the bulk to come down really slowly, because all those pinkies are now dropping through the water, and what you're looking for is as it gets to the bottom third, you're looking for the fish to grab your pinky, and the best way to actually see the bites is to actually hold it on allow it to sink really slowly, and by holding it on a tight line it sinks slower because you've got the drag of the tension of the line. If you just let it go in, it will go straight down. Let's check that bait because we bumped that one. Thought his bait's damaged. So we'll throw a bit far. A few pinkies in. One hook. Oh. Sometimes when you get a bit of moisture in the air, the line can stick to the whip and make it a bit difficult to get it out. Okay. So we're just going to hold that and allow it to sink slowly. And there you go. Just a hybrid, roach skimmer hybrid, yeah. Saw one swirl up there. I'm actually doing a video for kids to start fishing on the canal, so that's okay, mate. So one last go, see if we can get one more, and then we'll do a quick wash up on what we've done this evening. So again, we'll just throw 4 or 5 pinkies into the water. Do it twice, getting greedy now. And you've probably noticed that every time we get a better fish and it makes a bit of disturbance on the surface, the next run through you don't get anything. And that's because, as I said before, the water's very, very clear. The fish are used to commotion from predators quite a lot on here. So as soon as they hear splashing and a fish in distress, they will shoot off into the weed and into the cover. And then you'll probably have to wait a few minutes before they feel confident enough to come back. And the way you can get them confidence, particularly if you're feeding pinkies, as I said before, you can feed a few pinkies all the time and it doesn't actually feed the fish off, because the pinkies are the pinkies are smaller than maggots. They feed really slowly. There's that pike just swirled again. I just keep hearing the splash off to my right, and every time I turn around there's a big swirl. So I'm thinking there might be a shoulder roach up there, and that's a pike just helping itself to a bit of supper. And when you get predators moving around at this time of the evening, what it can do, it can unnerve the fish. So you'll get a little run of fish, and then it will go very, very quiet again, and you'll have to search further down the peg because the fish just get spooked away by the predators. I was kind of hoping we get one more. I want to end on a fish. The last cast, as Dave Harrell used to say, the last cast can go on for hours. You know, you say, oh, just one more fish, just one more fish. Now the other thing that can happen quite a lot when you start loose feeding pinkies at this time of the evening, what can happen is the fish can come high in the water, and therefore you're actually not actually going to get them. Your bait goes down through them too quick, and you could actually just start fishing really shallow or have a much lighter rig and strung out. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hold this dead still and let this sink really slowly, and just to see So what we'll do is we're going to flick it further down and do the same thing. What I want to do is hold this on a tight line. So we've gone about a metre further down the canal, do the same thing again, just because it's finding what depth the fish want to be at, and the bait passes through them at that depth. There you go, that's what it was, slightly further down the canal. Oh, and we'll net that one, and I think on that note, I think we'll end. Another hybrid. Maybe 4 ounces, maybe 5 ounces. Nice little fish. So, I'm going to pull my little elastic. We'll pop the whip out the way. So pretty much we've come down. We've not fed any of the ground bait that we mixed up. I'll probably throw that in as a feed to the fish because I'm off on holiday tomorrow. So I'll put the rest of my pinkies in, give them a feed, probably feed a line up there as well, and then hopefully fish will get used to the fact that some bait goes into this area, and next time we come along we can catch some more fish here. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope that's been useful. As I said, the keys really is, first of all, plumb up and find the depth. Try and find where the contours in the canal change. The fish don't want to be on a dead flat piece in the middle, because what happens is, particularly if they're feeding on the bottom, if they've got to turn up, they become vulnerable. They can't get away very quick. So if they've got a slope, roach and perch will often feed better and more confident up against weed or on a slope where they can actually get away, particularly in a canal like this where there are a lot of predators and the water's very clear. So plumb up. With a whip you're limited to where you can fish, but you can plumb around, come back in, hold it a bit closer to you or go a bit further out. Largely speaking, you're going to be fishing bottom of the inside going into the channel, which is where we've been fishing today. It goes a bit deeper across simply because the lock's on the far side and the boats run the far line until they get the other side of this, and then there's a left-hand bend, so then they crab across the canal to see round the corner. So we're fishing on the edge of the slope, just at the bottom of it, running down there, fishing and feeding, and catching fish just off the bottom. Now, remember what I said about putting a lighter plummet on. If you don't have a lighter plummet, a 5 gram plummet, you can just clip a swan shot on and just let it drag around, because that will help you find out where the bits of weeds are, what strands of weed there are in the peg. If you use a big plummet, sometimes it will just pull through that grass and you won't really notice that you've got anything until you start fishing and the float's not settling properly and you're not getting bites. Also think about, if you do find weed on the bottom, start on bread punch, because the bread punch will lie over the top of that weed, coating it, and the fish will sit over the top of it, and then you can run your big bright piece of punched bread over the top of that liquidized bread and hopefully catch some fish. And then don't be afraid to then do what we did tonight. If you feel that they might want pinkies, and they definitely did towards the end, is put a few pinkies in that liquidized bread ball, throw it in, loose feed a few pinkies later on as well, just to try and get a bit of interest. What you're trying to do is have some activity in the peg, some interest all the time, whether that be from ground bait being active or from the cloud from the liquidized bread, or one or two pinkies falling through the water all the time, or one or two maggots falling through the water all the time. And that will help to keep fish interested and in the peg. And then really it's just a case of just testing and adjusting what you're putting on the hook. Try a bigger bit of punch, smaller bit of punch, try a single pinky, double pinky, we didn't try that tonight, single maggot, but you just keep changing the hook baits, keep running through, add an inch or two, take an inch or two off, don't be afraid to come off the bottom. And also remember that with a whip, it's not just a case of throwing it in and letting it go in like a bag of spanners straight to the bottom. On the red letter days, with a bulk and one dropper, and you flick in, throw a ball of ground bait, it goes under, and you're swinging fish in all the time. That rarely happens on the canals in Scotland. The canals in Scotland can be very finicky, and what you need to do is the presentation needs to be good. So think about flicking the rig out on the same line all the time, but sometimes just let it go through, sometimes hold it up and let the float go down under control, sometimes hold it on a tight line and just allow it to drop through slowly. So hold that float and just watch that float, because it will just go away if they're up in the water. And then when you know where they are, you can maybe adjust it and actually try fishing at that depth. If it doesn't work, go back to the bottom again. So constantly changing the presentation, the hook baits, the way you feed, and you'll catch more fish. And that's part of the fun of it. That's why we love fishing, because every day's different and every day's a school day. So I look forward to seeing you out on the bank. The next video I'm going to do will be when I get back from holiday, and I'm probably going to go on the Union Canal in Edinburgh or just outside Edinburgh to have a look at quite a different canal. This one today, if I look at that, it's probably 7 foot deep, 7 foot deep, and we're fishing off the bottom. On the Union Canal is a lot shallower, as we said in the introduction to the canals video, and it needs a different approach because you do get a few more boats, and when the boats go through they do colour it up. So punch is not as effective on the Union Canal, but what we can do is we can fish really well with ground bait and pinkies, and we'll look at how we actually approach that sort of canal rather than a big canal like the Forth and Clyde. And then we'll probably do another video, maybe with a waggler a bit further along here where the canal is very wide, and we can look at how we approach a big wide open stretch with a rod and reel, and how we catch fish then. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and tight lines.